Sometimes I just want to put my earbuds in and be like, leave me the F alone, because I don't want to talk to anybody right now. And so I'm on the plane, and I'm putting my book away because my light doesn't work, and I'm going to get my earbuds out. And she's like, what do you do for a living? And I'm like, oh, no. Actually, what she started with is, can I ask you a question? And I'm like, you're gonna. So, yes, ask away. What do you do for a living? And I'm like, well, I'm a pastor, which is always elicits a really interesting responses from people. And she began to just pour out her heart to me on the airplane. And she's like, at the beginning of the pandemic, got in a really bad car accident and almost life-threatening, and had to go on pain medicine, got addicted to pain medicine, ended up in rehab because I was addicted to pain medicine. She has a 4-year-old son and a husband. She said almost, took my marriage. And when I was just getting out of rehab, my mother was going into the ICU with COVID, and she never made it out. She passed away. And then 4 months later, my dad died of a brain tumor. I mean, she's just going on and on. And then she's like, and she's like, I'm actually on this trip because my husband and I lost our house. And so we're living in an RV on some family land, and I had an emotional support dog that I got when my dad passed away, but we can't have him in the RV, and so I had to rehome him. And so I'm coming back from delivering the dog to the dog's new home. And I'm just like, one, feeling super guilty for being a little bit annoyed that she's talking to me, and just my heart was breaking for her. And I just looked at her, and I'm like, I am so sorry that you, I can't imagine the weight of the loss that you've experienced in the last 18 months. It's heartbreaking. And she kind of teared up, and I said a little prayer with her and asked her, do you have community anywhere? Who's your support system? And we talked about that a little bit, and I gave her some contact information from people that I know in the area, and walked away just reminded, once again, the Advent, it's not always magic for people. In fact, I think there's a lot of people during this season that don't feel joy naturally, that this season doesn't elicit any sort of good feelings for them at all. The Friday before I flew to Dallas, my mom and dad actually were at the funeral of my junior high best friend's father, who also retired 1 year ago and passed away from COVID a couple of weeks ago. They've actually been to 5 funerals in the last couple of weeks, people that they know that have passed away. And I think we all have stories. We all have stories of the hurt and the brokenness and the way that the mess of our world has impacted us and left us feeling really, really insecure and unsafe and out of control in the world around us. And I feel like the world's version of the magic of Christmas, what we might call the Christmas industrial complex, with all the glitter and all the lights and all the Hallmark happy endings, which, by the way, I'm a big fan of Hallmark at Christmas time, don't get me wrong. But I think that picture of Christmas is more about distracting us from the darkness and not so much about helping us find true light in the midst of the darkness. It's almost as if it's trying to help us forget, if but for a moment, that we live in this nasty world where things rarely go our way. But Advent calls us into something deeper. Advent acknowledges the darkness, but it impregnates us with an irrational hope that even in the midst of all the pain and all the brokenness, God is somehow mysteriously bringing new life into the world. And that one day God will heal all the wounds and bring harmony to all the disorder. Advent reminds us with authenticity and realism that no matter how acute the darkness seems, it will never be able to overcome the light. And I say all of that not to depress us, but to open us to what I believe is the true spirit of Advent. Advent is about 2 things in particular. It's about longing and it's about preparation. longing for that which is not here yet, and preparing for its coming. It connects to the good news of the gospel, this good news that God is indeed in the midst of us. God has entered the mess. God has entered our broken and disordered world to be with us, not to condemn us, but to heal us. This is what drives the spirit of Advent for us: longing and preparation. Our longing for something that is not yet is born out of an honest acknowledgement of our current reality. You don't long for something that you already have. It's not pretending or ignoring that the chaos is not here. It's not a pseudo peace that comes from turning a blind eye. Advent makes space for both the darkness and the light, which I hope is welcome news to any who carry heaviness into this season. Contrary to what society might tell you, the weight you carry during Advent does not exclude you from the season. In fact, it is an essential component to experience the fullness of what Advent actually means. But Advent isn't just about longing, it's also about preparation. Preparation motivated by a patient trust that even in the midst of the heaviness, God is indeed reconciling the world back to God's self. The invitation of Advent is not to think about something, but to prepare for something. And to prepare requires action on our part. If we follow the footsteps of Mary in the text that we read, we see this very thing play out. At the beginning of Luke 1, or earlier in Luke 1, Mary is told by an angel that she's going to have a baby, that she's going to be pregnant. Mary's initial response in preparation for what was coming was prayer. A prayer of surrender that acknowledged the cost, but also the promised beauty in what looked like an impossible situation. We know that Mary comes from a small rural town in the far northern region of Judea, and that area of Jerusalem, in fact, all of Jerusalem, was under the enemy occupation of the Romans. The life of a Jew during these times was precarious at best. They faced major external and internal threats to both their religious practice and their general well-being. There was much political upheaval in Mary's time, and the Roman Empire was losing patience with the Jewish people. And they tended to mount, as the Jewish people tended to mount revolts to be free from Roman occupation. The salvation that they were anticipating was directly tied to their political, social, and economic position. Mary lived in a world where she understood through personal experience how the policies of the powerful and connected, those who were friends of the Romans and high priests, their policies had exacerbated the always fragile economy of Galilee and Judea and plunged the people of the land into hunger, into poverty, and into mourning. She shows us we are to live out our longing and preparation for God's action in our messy and disordered world. And it starts with prayer. A prayer of surrender that says to God, let the beauty and reconciliation that you are bringing into this world be born through me in some mysterious way. The invitation for us in this is clear. In our longing and our preparation, we too are being asked to surrender and allow God's will to be born in our world through us. We prepare by slowing ourselves down and saying, here I am, send me God. A surrender that will most assuredly fill us with hope, but cost us something as well. The very next thing Mary does after being visited by the angels is it says she moves with haste to go share the hope that is growing within her. Now, Angie and I have been married for almost 26 years. Our daughter is 22. But when Angie was pregnant with Taylor, we were going on a road trip one evening, and Angie was a little hangry, red face. Like, Angie has this really interesting she loves her food and the experience, and she needed that experience, especially as a pregnant woman. And everything is closed, it's late at night, and then, we're driving down the road, and off in the distance, that golden oasis off the freeway in the shape of an M. And we pull off the freeway, and we pull into McDonald's, and 2 cheeseburger meal, extra onions, please, and fries and a large soda. And we get it. I mean, as we're pulling out of the driveway, the light goes off. Like we barely made it into the drive-thru. And she's gone from angry to happy. Like, I got my food. This is great. Opens up the cheeseburger, and she's like, she puts the wrapper around the bottom. She just does it all very particular. And smells it like in her happy place. She's got her food. Everything's going to be okay. Takes a great big bite, and her face just gets red, and language comes that it's not as colorful as her face. And I'm like, what's going on? And she opens her cheeseburger, and there are extra onions. And there's ketchup and mustard and mayo, or not mayo, and cheese. But there's no meat on the cheeseburger. They didn't put meat on my cheeseburger, she said. She was so angry, which I imagine what happened is, like, they probably already cleaned off the grills. It's getting close to closing, and they're like, hell no, we are not reopening these. I have to clean them all over again for y'all, so you'll be gone before you even know. So they gave us meatless veggie cheeseburgers before they actually had veggie cheeseburgers. Point of the story is, it's hard to travel when you're pregnant. But the first thing Mary does after she finds out she's pregnant is it says she moves with haste, and she travels 80 miles to go share the good news. Now, 80 miles, I don't think she had a car. So, like, this was 80 miles, probably on a camel or on foot, through not so safe areas to travel. Would have had to go through, like, Samaria and where the story of the Good Samaritan happens, like that road. So, like, not a safe trip for a woman who's traveling alone. But that's exactly what she does. She risks a lot, but the peace that she's feeling inside of her because of the hope that she's been filled with leads her to go share the good news. I've heard sermons that talk about the first evangelist being a woman, but they're usually referring to the other Mary at the end of the Gospel of Luke that goes back and tells the disciples that Jesus is risen from the dead. However, this Mary, the mother of Jesus, on this Advent was actually the first evangelist, showing us that the way you prepare for the peace of God about to be born into the world is to share the good news with others. When you catch a vision of the coming harmony and reconciliation of God in the midst of our disordered and chaotic world, you have no choice but to share it. And if we are to follow in Mary's footsteps, we too must be a good news people, a people not afraid to share the answer for the hope that is within us. Isaiah 52:7 says, "How beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of the messenger who brings peace, who brings good news and announces salvation and says to Zion, your God reigns." So Mary goes to meet with Elizabeth and share the good news. And then we come to the text that we read at the top of our time today, her song of praise, as she has found in community the affirmation that truly God has not left us to be alone in this cruel and dark world. And it is in this text that we come to our theme of joy. A few weeks ago, we talked about Psalm 137, where it says, how can I sing the song of the Lord in a foreign land? And Mary, in her extraordinary leadership, shows us just how you do it. Author and theologian Henry Nouwen says, while happiness usually depends on circumstances, joy runs deeper. Joy, he writes, is the experience of knowing that you are unconditionally loved and that nothing, sickness, failure, emotional distress, oppression, war, even death, nothing can take that love away. Thus, joy and sorrow can not only coexist, but joy can only be found in the midst of sorrowful circumstances. By all outward appearances, Mary's situation was difficult and vulnerable, but her effervescent song of joy flows from a wellspring deeper than the surface of her immediate circumstance. What if joy were actually an act of resistance? Remember, in Advent, we're longing and we're preparing. Joy helps us long for more while simultaneously denying the empire its power over us. That is really the difference between joy and happiness. Happiness finds its home in a temporary present circumstance, whereas joy makes its home in our longing for that which we have faith will be born into our world. That the worst thing will never be the last thing. Audre Lorde sums up this idea clearly in her 1978 essay, The Use of the Erotic. In order to perpetuate itself, every oppression must corrupt or distort those various sources of power within the culture of the oppressed that can provide an energy for change. Simply put, joy can be considered resistance because it is a source of power that provides us with an energy for change, as Lord puts it. It counters and it contrasts with the rigidity and control of the oppressive structures in a nonviolent way. Adrienne Marie Brown, author of the book Pleasure Activism, says, recognize that pleasure is a measure of freedom, which takes as its premise that the state of being the activist and striving for justice and liberation and well-being are highly joyful states. And therefore, pleasure can be a powerful tool for helping us achieve them. To be able to choose our joy and experience it, this is the freedom we are all fighting for. Joy points us to abundance. The language of oppression is one of scarcity and one of fear. I think to some extent, the activist's goal must be to remind those who have been convinced that progress is a losing game for them that there is, in fact, enough to go around. And joy is where that action starts. In Mary's song of joy, you see the activism. She confronts moral injustice by saying, God, scatter the proud. She confronts social injustice by saying, God, topple the mighty from their throne. And she confronts economic injustice by saying, satisfy the hungry and send the rich away empty. Joy makes its home in our longing. It's not an enemy of our heaviness or sadness, but rather it is a balm in the midst of it. It is possible to feel the heaviness of this season and joy all at the same time. But Advent isn't just about longing, it's also about preparation. How do we embrace joy in this season and prepare for what God is birthing in our world through us? The great Saint Brené Brown tells us there is a significant connection between gratitude and joy. People who experience the most joy in their lives practice gratitude on a regular basis. Mary's song, though it names the reality of the current situation, is still a song of rejoicing. It is a song of praise. So gratitude is about choosing what we are going to see and how we choose to see it. Mary sees the injustice, but only she sees it through the eyes of what God is doing. She knows that the life that's growing inside of her and what that life represents, and there is nothing that the power of darkness can do to hold it back. I believe the preparation we are being invited to in this season of joy is gratitude. Now, we can talk about gratitude, or we can practice gratitude. And I feel like I'd rather us practice gratitude than simply talk about gratitude. And so what I would like for you to do, we're going to do a little activity. My friend Mike Bachman calls this praying with fire. Not playing with fire, praying with fire. But everyone's going to get a match. Angie, you have matches? Who has the matches? Do I have the matches? So do you want to hand them out for me? Everyone's going to get a match. And let's break into like 2 smaller groups maybe and like get in a bit of a circle. And this is how you do praying with fire. We're going to open up with a prayer, something about God, thank you for not abandoning us, but instead coming to be with us in the midst of this mess. I am grateful for your presence in my life through, and then you're just going to strike your match. And as that flame burns, you're just going to watch the flame, and you're just going to start naming people, circumstances, whatever it is in your life that you're grateful for. And as soon as the flame goes out, or you need to shake it out because it's burning your finger, then you're done. And then it goes on to the next person. For those of you at home, if you don't have matches and you don't want to pray with fire, you're welcome to just talk amongst yourselves and share with one another. What are the things that you're grateful for? What are the things in your life that you see the presence of God through those things and you're grateful for having them? And so we're just going to take some moments here and we're just going to practice. We're going to prepare. We're going to be active in our preparation for joy through through a prayer activity. So there should be two things that allow for striking the match, right? Angie has one. And then is there a box that has a... Yes. So we'll have two groups. Let's have one group over here. You can move the chairs if you want in a circle. We'll do one group over here, move the chairs in a circle. And you're just going to say, again, something to the effect of, I'm grateful for your presence in my life through, strike the match, and then just start naming the things you're grateful for. Do you all have something to strike it with? That should work, but it doesn't have to be the So you're just saying, God, I'm grateful for your presence in my life through strike the match, and you're just going to look right into the flame and name the things you're grateful for. Yep, then you're down to the next person. Let's, as you make your way back to your seats, we're going to do one last song, and Tasha's going to lead us in communion. Thank you for humoring me with our little activity, and I just feel like there's some things that we talk about too much, or we think about too much, but we don't practice quite enough. And I think this is a way for us to lean in a little bit. So you're up.
My turn. I feel like Goldilocks right now because it's like this one's too short, this one's too tall. So I'm going to kind of stand in the middle, and hopefully y'all will hear me. Just as a disclaimer real quick, if y'all had experienced any technical difficulties, this is the byproduct of having a stripped down service and your three pastors, me, Matt, and Sergio, running the service alone. And by three pastors, I really mean Matt and Sergio, and this is the most like heteronormative thing you will hear me say. Like, they were running it, and I'm just standing there like, tell me where to click on the screen. So we apologize in advance. This is a time where we do our giving and receiving. If you've been around the last couple months, you've seen how we do this. We do this a couple of different ways. We want to make sure that you always have an opportunity for prayer. So if you need prayer, there are cards in the back. There are 2 tables in the back. You can write a prayer down on there. You can put your name and your contact info, and we'll follow up with you. If you want to put it anonymously, you can. You can send us an email at info@newstorychicago.com. And I will be standing in the back if you want to pray in person, anyone in here. And on the live stream, go ahead and send us an email if you have a prayer. We also have our offering. There's different ways to do that. We always encourage folks to do it through Church Center. That's the easiest way. Download the Church Center app, and you can give through that app. And we also have collection plates at the back. We do our collection plates a little bit different here at Newstory. Because of the pandemic, most things have gone online, and so we really want that to be a place where you can receive if you need it. So the mantra, again, for those collection plates is, give as you're able if you're here and you have some dollars to spare, but also take as you need. And there's no judgment here. So there's already money in there. There's always money there every week. If you need $5 for the train, if you need money to get some food, that's what it's there for. We want to be a community that loves on our community, and so we always want to make sure that that is available to the folks here. So take if you need it, and give if you're able. And again, as Matt said, the final part of our giving and receiving is our time of communion. This is one of my favorite sacraments in the Christian tradition because it really invites us into community. Jesus is always creating opportunities for us to be in community with one another. And this is probably the ultimate act of community that we have as a community of Jesus followers. And Scripture tells us that on the night before Jesus would surrender his life for the good of the world, for all of creation, some would say on the night before that he was betrayed, he met with his closest friends, and he sat around a table and he shared a meal with them as an act of community. And during that meal, or after the meal, he took a loaf of bread and he gave thanks for it, and he broke it. And he said, "This is my body broken for you. Eat of it." And in the same way, he took a cup of wine and he blessed it like he did the bread. And he said, "This is my blood shed for you, the cup of the new covenant. Drink of it." And he reminds us that as often as we do this together, that we do it in love, that we do it in remembrance of God's love for us, and as a reminder that we are called to love one another in community. And this is just one beautiful example. And so we invite you on the live stream, we invite you here. If you're able to rise, we have some prepackaged elements at the back for our Eucharist, our communion. Grab one as we continue to play music, and eat as you are able, and then we will close out in song together. So as you're able, please rise, collect your communion elements, and let's partake together.
Like I know a friend, I want to know you, Lord. I want to know you, Lord. Like I know a friend, I want to know you, Lord. my religion. I'm laying down, wanna know you, Lord. I know you, Lord. I used to think I could box you in, but I'm laying down, wanna know you, Lord. I used to think I could box you in, I'm laying down, wanna know you, Lord. I'm laying down all my religion. I'm laying down, wanna know you, Lord. I'm laying down all my religion. I'm laying down, wanna know you, Lord. Lord, I've been told to be ashamed. Lord, I've been told I don't measure up. Lord, I've been told I'm not good enough. But you're here with me. And I'm laying down all my religion. I'm laying down, wanna know you, Lord. I'm laying down all my religion. I'm laying down, wanna know you, Lord. And I reach out and you find me in the dust. You say no amount of untruths can separate us. I reach out and I reach out and you find me in the dust. Say no amount of untruths can separate us. And I will rejoice in the simple gospel. I will rejoice in you, Lord. I will rejoice in the simple gospel. I will rejoice in you, Lord. I will rejoice in the simple gospel. I will rejoice in you, Lord. God, I pray in this season that we would long for the world that you are building. But God, we wouldn't just long for it, we would prepare for its coming. God, that we would be people of peace, a people that pray. God, we'd be people that share the good news with those around us. And finally, God, that we would be a people who acknowledge the gratitude that we have for the goodness in our life and embrace the joy in the midst of the chaos as an act of resistance and a way of telling the empire the worst thing will never be the last thing. In Jesus' name, amen. go in hope and in peace and enjoy this Advent season. Thank you all for coming, and we'll see you next week. Come ready to decorate some cookies, by the way, because we're gonna have a bunch of sugar cookies here and frosting and all the fixins, and we're gonna be creating some. And it'll be COVID safe. Yes, we have a plan. We have a plan. It will be COVID safe. So come join us for that. So have a great week.